Hello, and welcome to the live stream panel from Hacker House Security Solutions. My name is Eddie Miro. Thank you for everyone who's tuning in live, and thank you to everyone who will check this out later on YouTube. Really excited to be here today and do this conversation about cybersecurity for SMBs. Um, we have a really great lineup of guests here. I'm going to go ahead and just transition over and introduce some of them and give everyone a chance to go through and introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your background. So I'm just going to go through and from left to right, as from what I can see, we'll start off with James. James, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. I'm James Byerly, co-founder of Secure Point Solutions. We are a small business-focused MSSP with clients ranging from just a single employee all the way up. We also work with managed service providers that are trying to find a different way of doing security.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, James. Glenn, welcome to the stream.
Hi, I'm Glenn Sorensen. I have been in the IT and security space on about 20 years, depending on how much misspent youth you count in that. Um, I have been a virtual CISO recently, and I'm transitioning to a new role with a new company here very shortly. Um, but I've seen a lot of what goes on in small businesses and small and medium businesses, I would say. Seen some of their challenges and hopefully have some insight to offer here.
Awesome. And then of course we're joined by the founders of Hacker House, Steve and Ushi. Who wants to go first, Steve or Ushi? Steve, you want to go first?
Oosh can go first.
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Ushi Heffernan. I started my career as a police detective specializing in special victims crimes. And then I joined the U.S. Secret Service's Electronics Crimes Task Force. That is always a tongue twister, where I was trained in computer forensics. And from there, I moved into cybersecurity. I served as a SOC analyst with a large defense contractor, and then later moved into a threat research position with Mandiant and Google, where I used to analyze and recreate how adversaries operate. Today, I'm the CEO and virtual chief information security officer here at Hacker House, where we help small, mid-sized businesses navigate compliance, protect sensitive data, build security programs, that kind of thing that work in the real world.
Steve.
All right. Hello, everyone. I've been breaking and building computers since I could hold a screwdriver. Um, Turned out to be a good career. Um, this past month, I hit 20 years in the National Guard, where I've done everything from help desk sysadmin, database admin, like you name it. And my current position is helping manage a team of incident responders with a focus on critical infrastructure. Um, I think with kind of the natural progression with Ush and I making the decision to start this up, um, we've been real fortunate to where I could come on full time, and so I'm starting to make that transition out of the National Guard and be able to give Hacker House my all my focus.
That's awesome. Thank you everyone for introducing yourself. I know from being friends with all of you and working with Steve and Ushi that we all share that we see that the biggest segment of victims out there getting hit in the cyber world tend to be the small and medium businesses, and you don't hear about them as much. The news focuses on big enterprise breaches and big attacks, and that makes sense. But for a lot of people in the world, they're stuck in that place where they're the biggest target. They're being hit the hardest, and they have the least amount of resources. And this is something that has Hacker House. We don't want to be a company that only focuses on the big fish. We want to focus on making the biggest impact in the world and being able to provide the level of service that we do to make it accessible to any business role. The first question I'm going to ask, and we'll leave it up to you to chime in if you want to, but what's the biggest blind spot you see for SMB customers when it comes to cybersecurity?
I'd say I think there's a handful, um, but a lot of it stems from the mentality of, it won't happen to me. That's the thing that happens to other people, or I don't have anything that anybody wants, or I'm too small a target. Um, and I think that that sets the stage for some complacency, and then maybe the idea that your cybersecurity is also your MSP or the IT guy that you have in the corner of the basement somewhere, and that just they just handle all that stuff, and that to me is the blind spot that um, that people wake up to very suddenly and brutally when something bad happens to them. So.
I agree completely. I think like one of the biggest blind spots is just not recognizing that you are at risk, that you do have risks, and because one until we recognize that there's risks in any platform, no matter how large or small, we can't even then begin to mitigate those.
I think it creates for us, it creates a barrier where now we have to spend extra time educating a business on the kind of the birds and the bees when it comes to cybersecurity, and then at that point finally can tell them, hey, it's not all doom and gloom. There's things that we can help you with, or there's other resources. So yeah, it's a the number of times you get that phone call or you call somebody, they're like, oh, we're too small to be hacked. And have you told Scattered Spider that they probably they'll just take you off the list. Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah, a couple of you kind of alluded to the fact that that a lot of SMB, customers will see themselves as being too small, right? And an area that I'm really interested in is social engineering, and I've been exploring this idea of using AI and LLMs to do spear phishing campaigns at scale, which is something that, as an industry, we're really not prepared for. And like James said, Scattered Spider isn't worried about you know the fact that you're a small customer, and yeah. So the next question that I would have to kind of to piggyback on that is, what is the first sign that an SMB should look for, to know that it's time that they need to reach out for help, whether that's, through a virtual CISO or through an MSSP like what James does, or through a consultancy like what Hacker House does? What's your first indicator that, okay, this is too big for me. How do I take it to the next level?
I think.
Um,
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that, again, one of the things that I unfortunately have seen is that something bad happens, and then they realize that where they were at is not, it was not ever safe, and they were disabused of this notion that their IT guy in the corner in the basement was taking care of all of this stuff, and they do have more risks than they thought they did, and then they're in this position of, okay, well, now where do I start? So helping them start answer that question is the first place where a lot of customers could come to me in the past. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. You took the words right out of my mouth. Like that's so spot on. And I think that's kind of a result of like you don't know what you don't know. Um and um I think I think that if small businesses just going off of the idea that you don't know what you don't know, um, can get some type of assessment done by a third party. I mean, even internally, right? Because regardless of who the business is, when you go through that assessment process, you're always gonna highlight opportunities for improvements and things that you probably thought were one way, but they're really another. And so, that's such a critical component in getting that visibility to like what's actually going on. um, and then of course the outcome being you have a checklist of improvements to make, and that in itself kind of provides that guidance and direction um, that these organizations need.
I think there's also a part where it's not just the, okay, an incident's happened, so now we need to fix things, but also if you're a business and you realize, oh, I want to play with the big boys. I want our aerospace company wants to rub elbows with Lockheed Martin, or my little mortgage consultancy needs access to Wells Fargo. You think of all those, had go back 12 years, had Fazio Mechanical maybe thought that a little bit through more and had Target at the same time asked them the right questions, things like that might have never happened. So there's definitely an area where it's like you want to grow your business, you probably need to start making some big kid decisions about how you take care of both your business, but then your upline and downline clients, vendors, things like that.
Yeah, that supply chain and customer pressure is increasingly a thing. And that stuff is showing up in contracts now in a lot of ways that it wasn't necessarily before. So in order to do business with some of the people that you may have been doing business with, or in the spaces you may have been doing business with for a long time, now you have requirements that you probably didn't have before, and you need to think about these things. You should have been thinking about them anyway, but again, if you don't know what you don't know, well, now you know, and now you have to start. So.
And having somebody come in as soon as you're starting those contract, either negotiations, or like if you're a contractor, like an SBIR getting, government contracts. I've seen that, oftentimes people, there's so many words in those contracts that they're not reading, they're not understanding compliance requirements, security requirements, what, those data requirements are. And then there's a lot of things that can take a good amount of time to prepare before you can start, actually engaging with those customers, and bringing somebody in. Once you realize that like this is a little bit bigger than me, that I don't understand what all these things are saying, I think that's a good time to bring somebody in. But I also think like with the smaller businesses, who may not think that like, oh, I don't really have a lot of vendors, or oh, I don't really have, you know, they may not think that they have a risk. If you have things you don't want to ever lose, if you're a small business, and you recognize that, oh, if that went south, that could have really damaged my business, that's the time to start considering assessments. And like Steve had mentioned, I think like internal assessments for super small businesses, I recommend. Start looking at your own infrastructure and what you've got going on. And if you start getting to the point where you're like, um, if you start getting to the point where you're like, I don't understand some of these words, I think I need, I'm not versed enough. That's when you can call somebody in and do just something as simple as like an assessment, like Steve mentioned, something outside of just an internal assessment. But yeah.
Yeah, I think uh, the things that a small business needs to realize is um, it is an existential threat potentially to their business, and those things that you don't know about can actually tank your business. And you do have things that are valuable. You have revenue streams, you have employees, you have customers that you're serving, and disruption of those things is a value that that the bad guys will seize on. I mean, and they're not looking for uh, they don't they don't necessarily care whether you're a 10,000 person company or a 10-person company.
Well, and I mean, all we have to do is look at our own junk email box, right? And we're singular people, and they're after us. So there's zero reason to assume that your company's ever too small.
Yep, exactly. And a lot of the ransomware groups are they're just looking to cause disruption enough to where your business is brought to its knees and you have to pay something to recover. And that's obviously a working business model, or it wouldn't have grown like it has. So,
Yeah, and it's
Let's
funny you mentioned that. That brings up, oh, Eddie,
no go, please.
um, talking about the blind spots. Um, I I have worked a lot of incidents, and not a single one of them an organization was able to successfully recover from backups. If they did take them, they weren't tested. And testing as part of your recovery phase of an incident response process is not the time.
I love running tabletop exercises, especially, and challenging that assumption. You'll get the, well, we have backups, like, but do you? Well, what are you really backing up? Are you backing up the things that you think that you're backing up? Do you know
Yeah.
that you can actually recover from them? And I end up getting a lot of deer in the headlights look, and a lot of assumptions shattered, which is
Yeah.
what I'm looking to do in those cases.
Yeah.
A lot of the backups, I mean, cloud has kind of helped make backups a little more instantaneous, but I've definitely talked to customers and said, what are you doing for backups? Well, every week the office manager changes out the hard drive attached to the server. Neat. Are you prepared to have to go back in time to a whole week if you have to recreate data? And they're like, wait, what are you talking about? I said, you can't you can't recover what's not backed up. And after a little bit, they're like, oh, we need to tighten that up. I'm like, yeah, you definitely need to.
This is a good point. That and when I was a teacher, I would talk to my students about ransomware, and they would just say, well, why would anyone ever pay the ransom for their own data? They have backups, right? It's like, sure, you may have backups, but if you're a 911 dispatcher or a doctor's office or a hospital, and the mean time to recovery is like 2 weeks, or you've never tested it, like, yeah, you're gonna pay the ransom, right? Okay,
That's why a
so
lot of folks do.
yeah, I mean, it's just the way that it is. So let's assume I'm a small business owner, and I'm sold on this idea that I need to step up my cybersecurity. So I have a limited budget, as many small and medium businesses do. What would your advice be for where I should dedicate that limited resource immediately to get the best impact?
I say user awareness training. Um, there's even like very basic level user awareness training topics are easily accessible. Um, if you have any type of IT or security staff, just talking to them, maybe doing like a lunch and learn. Um, the uh, the Sans Ouch newsletter is a good resource. You can sign up for it. You can go to the website and look through the topics that they speak to. Um, yeah, the users are always going to be the biggest threat, right? Whether it's insider threat, whether it's somebody that is making business decisions that involve IT and security that don't understand the risks that they need to be mitigating or assessing. Yeah, I think that's a big one.
And
I
I
would
think that comes
say
back to culture too. Like, that influences the culture of what you're trying to build, and that awareness then permeates a lot of parts of the business. So
I'm going to go a different direction with it and say access control. I think that small businesses, they you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of places, what I've seen is that you want your core executive suite to have full visibility, and we're all partners here, and so we give everybody access to everything. And if you don't need access to finance folders, you shouldn't have access to finance folders. And that doesn't mean, like, the CEO doesn't need necessarily access to finance folders. And I think that sometimes what I see is that they worry that, oh, but I'm getting access taken away from me. And what they don't understand is just simply kind of that flow of how threat actors are getting into things, and what lateral movement means, and how important it is to make sure that we're locking down the gates, right? Because I always equate things back to a physical building, and maybe you have the key to the front door, but you don't need the key all the way into the vault, and we don't need to keep those gates open. And so I think it's so important, if you need to get into the vault, somebody else can come along with their key and let you in. It doesn't mean you're not ever going to have access to those resources. It just means that, if your HR person gets breached, unfortunately. And because we haven't locked anything down, we're giving everybody access, and kind of the kings to the kingdom. So I find I'm so like least privilege access. Only have what you need to have to do your job, and make sure that access to the most sensitive documents, number one, know where they are, and make sure that those your access to those things are tightly controlled.
But boy,
That's my
don't executives and C-suite folks love to have as much privilege as possible? And it's like we try to explain to them as a social engineer, this is why I spearfish you, you know?
exactly.
I think asset management too is huge because it's we tell people you can't we can't protect what we don't know about. But even for a small business that's just taking its steps, how many computers do you have? What are um, do they actually did they all come with antivirus? Are they at least current? Forget the vendor, just do you have something, or was that uh trial that came with your computer, did it end 3 months ago and you just blew it off? So those little things, and then taking away local admin, even if you don't have an IT person in the office, at least designate somebody to know the admin account. If it's a 5-person office, you know, you don't have to necessarily do the IT work, but if somebody says, "Hey, I need to update my QuickBooks," okay, give me a second, I'll type that in for you, and it's just so much safer to have that removed. It creates friction, but it creates a hell of a lot more friction for the threat actors.
Yeah, I think to build on what you were saying too, like making sure that your antivirus is up to date is awesome. If you're in a small office where you have a small network set up, you want to make sure too that whatever firewall appliances or whatever that you have are periodically checked, because it's really easy for some of those internet of IoT devices, Internet of Things devices, to get breached, get vulnerabilities. And like we've seen before where firewalls aren't getting patched, and there's open vulnerabilities that are being exploited in the wild right now, and we don't know because we're not making sure those systems are getting updated. If you have any appliances that are connected to the internet, they need to be on a somewhat regular basis, make sure that we're checking and making sure they're still secure and up to date as well.
Yeah. Imagine getting popped from a thermometer in a fish tank.
The
Yeah,
best part of that is it happened.
I, I'd like to see a thermometer maybe mine some Bitcoin, though. That'd be fun.
well, and James, if I'm remembering correctly, you were kind of referencing the Target breach, right? And that happened through like a lateral traversal from like a thermostat, or was like a third party device that was plugged into the same VLAN that the cash registers were on, and they were able to pivot from there. Just such a small innocuous thing. And I know from my work as a freelance IT guy that SMBs tend to be like rogue IT like nightmares. So
Exactly.
Well, I mean, it's just make it work, right? It's that availability thing that trumps the confidentiality and integrity. So the CIA triad, but A is always the most important, most visible. So until it's not, so
I think too something right now we're seeing an influx in kind of like AI driven, AI powered, like dev companies coming out. And I think a lot of tech startups forget about security. They're super smart. They know how to make computers work. They know how to do the things. But security is often one of those things that kind of gets left behind. And maybe this is a better blind spot answer, but I think that remembering um, that there are still vulnerabilities in the cloud. That was I did threat research in the cloud before I left Google, And there's a lot of different ways that threat actors can move through your code, even if you're keeping it in what you think is a secure cloud place. So yeah, just being understanding of kind of your threat landscape and what the areas are that can be attacked.
I think talking about cloud too just brings up the fact that, that's another misconception. Well, all my data's in the cloud, so I don't
So
have to
it's
worry about the
secure.
security.
Microsoft
Yeah.
handles all the security for that.
Yeah. Well, how do you connect to it? Well, through the computer. All right. Well, Microsoft doesn't protect that computer. And oh, by the way, you have passwords.txt on your desktop, and that's got everything
And
that the attacker needs. So
your global admin account lives in that. So
right. So it's like, yeah, I'm not smart enough to get through, whatever security AWS has, but I bet I can get somebody at your office to let me on their computer, and I'll just pull up the console from there. So it's just a different way around, and it's that blind spot again that
you
people fail
don't
to
need to go
realize.
through the back door if the front door is left open or the keys sitting under the doormat. So
Yeah, I mean
like
that's what first thing that comes to my mind is how many of these cloud incidents are just, misconfigured from the beginning, or the data is just publicly available for some reason. So just, yeah, standard best practices. Um, yeah, another thing that I thought of just now was you talked about these AI plays as far as like startups, and I think the last time I heard a statistic, it was like 80% of venture capital money right now is going to AI plays. Oh, hope it pays off for him. We'll see. It seems like AI detection and cybersecurity would be something that could make cybersecurity more successful or accessible to SMB customers. Let's say I'm a medium-sized business though, and I have to make the choice to outsource to an MSSP, or to reach out to a VCSO for their services, or to bring someone on in house. What would be some of the considerations that you would make for that?
The biggest right at the front. Well, I think Ushi, you're saying money. Was money the
Cash.
yeah.
yeah, the cash. Well, and the cash, because the cash is also going to get you staffing. You don't bring in a dude or dudette to suddenly run your security program. They can't be there 24/7, and they definitely won't want to be. So that decision of, do you go in-house versus a service provider like us, right there is the first answer. Do you want to monitor this only between 8 and 5, or do you want to Monday through Friday, or do you want to monitor all the time? um, and then the vCISO part is also kind of that no-brainer. You're not bringing on a CISO for $40,000 or something. So hire a group of experts there, because you'll get. And I think too, even with an MSSP, is that we're still a neutral party. Yes, you pay my bills, you pay me the invoice, but I'm not necessarily beholden to you when you start wanting to do things that really go against best practices. Um, I can simply say, like, look, you could do that, but then unfortunately you also will be in breach, and I'm gonna need you to find another MSSP. So just those advantages are there.
I always say just like take a step back and understand your environment, your business, your situation first. Are you in a heavily regulated environment? Are you in a completely unregulated environment? Are you what are your customers asking, demanding, expecting of you? What does your business do? What are the things that are critical to your business? What keeps the revenue streams for your business operating? And then we can start to kind of design a strategy that helps a little bit. But I think there's a lot of room for having that vCISO as the trusted advisor and providing leadership and direction, and kind of getting into some of the things that go beyond a lot of the technology. And then you bring in your MSSP for the technology and the expertise on that front. And having a little bit of that insulation maybe between those two parties helps limit some of that potential conflict of interest too, where if you try and run everything through one company, and you potentially have that availability thing become more important than some of the other security pieces, or vice versa. um, So I think having that separate trusted advisor, whether you bring that in house eventually or not, most companies in the mid-sized space aren't necessarily ready to bring a CISO in house full time. So they can dip their toe into it with the virtual CISO, and then as they grow, as they mature, then they can think about what a full-time role would look like there. So I think there's a couple of different spaces in which we're talking here that are important to consider.
She,
I
you look like
think,
you wanted to say something.
yeah, because I think that it's important when you're starting out and you're realizing I need security, I don't know where to go from here. Is the first step is to call someone in like a vCISO to sit down with you, and the whole purpose, right, of us being vCISOs, and what our point there is to do exactly what Glenn just said, help walk you through those questions. You don't necessarily have to come up with those on your own, because depending on where you are in your business career, or how versed you are in security, that's what we're here for. We're here to help you. And so I think the first thing is just, it doesn't have to be kind of an all or nothing thing. It's not like, oh, we're immediately going to start, we need all of these security products, all of these things. It can start very small, and depending on what your budget is, depending on kind of how that assessment goes with a vCISO, then you start figuring out, where do I go from here? And nobody goes, I think a lot of people think that, like, we either have to figure this out ourselves internally, like, with Bob, the IT guy, or we have to go all in and spend, $100,000 a year or more on our security. And the fact of the matter is that even large organizations don't have perfect security. We're always just trying to improve. I have seen organizations on massive levels that have worse security than our four-person small business, because our four-person small business cares, and they're like, okay, what can we do today to make this a little bit better? Hey, I heard about this, what do you think? Is this a good security strategy? Or we say to them, hey, there's this. But some of these large organizations even aren't doing that. And so I think just understanding that it can seem very overwhelming, but starting with just one person, starting with a conversation, and those things don't necessarily have to go very far. It can be something as simple as a vCISO coming in once a year and helping you to, like, let's look at what you've got going on, how can we improve that for this year, and making guideposts along the way.
Yeah, what's the right solution for you? I think is the question that you really need to keep in mind when you're having these conversations.
I've worked for a very large enterprise MSSP before, and I won't mention their name, but I have looked at the internal security awareness training statistics, and they used to do their own internal phishing campaigns, and a lot higher percentage of people failed the phishing test at a company that's dedicated to cybersecurity than you would imagine. So yeah, it's definitely a huge problem. Let's say I'm Bob the IT guy and I work for an SMB, and my boss says you have to deal with this. This is now your problem. So I jump on ChatGPT and I start looking for like open source solutions. Right, I'm running Nessus, and I'm doing my own like endpoint detection, and I'm trying to implement as many like free and open source tools as possible. What is some trouble I could get into?
I would say from a healthcare perspective, running a scan against medical devices isn't physically like that could cause harm to people. That's not a situation that anybody wants to end up in, especially in this scenario where it seems like it would be negligent.
I think there's a lot of room to then focus too much on the technical aspects and not enough on the people and process aspects. Um, this ultimately becomes a management problem. This is Cyber is a business risk like your other business risks, and you need to think about it that way as a business leader. But if you are then Bob, the IT guy tasked with that, I think realizing that there is more to it than just the tech, like that may be the world that you live in most of the time. Um, but we need to get tech that handles business needs and is representative of business risk and risk tolerances. So I think asking those management questions gets you further than just diving into the tech and the pieces, and maybe missing things and not knowing things that you don't know again. um, I think you still need that advisor, whether you go to the MSSP or the VCISO. I think you still need somebody else that has some more experience that you can lean on a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, as Bob, the IT guy, James mentioned asset management and asset inventories earlier. It's like you have to know what's there to be able to protect it. And yeah, Bob, the IT guy, might not think about things that way. He might not think about risk what can be accepted and what
Exactly.
needs to be outsourced and what can be mitigated in house. Um, yeah. Also, Steve, when he mentioned running an Nessus, certain networks, it's like if you're firing off an Nmap scan on an OT network, you could cause
Turn it
damage.
off, turn it off.
Yeah. So
I think also Glenn, talking about people, process, and technology, and the two P's are definitely get forgotten when Bob is just trying to figure things out. And earlier, Eddie, we were talking about best bang for your buck. You want to potentially completely stop BEC scams. Have a process that says if you have to move more than $5,000 of company funds, you need a second person to look at that, or you need a second path of communication. Boom,
Yeah.
you have pretty much ended one threat vector. I mean, or at least one method. Mistakes can still happen, but if you set that standard as a process and you train to that process, then you have gotten about as close to 100% effective in one area that you can in this business.
And you have to keep in mind what the bad guys are after. Most of the time it's your money.
Yep.
And it's money in one way or another. So those questions right there, asking and answering those questions is worth a lot. I mean, who can change payment information? If it's just one person, um, it's easy enough to trick a person into doing something like that. And I think that's where a lot of the fraud happens there too. So
Exactly.
not necessarily any technical. They're not deploying malware. They're not getting you to click on links. They're just saying, "Hey, I'm so and so. Pay my invoice here instead." So,
And I think that comes down to user training and awareness as well, right? Like we need
yeah,
to be identifying who the people are in the organization that are going to be targeted the most, and making sure that we are giving them that extra training so that they recognize that. I remember being in the SOC, and I always knew that if I got a phishing submission from this particular person, it was legit. It was because they were so hyper aware that their finance position was a target, and they absolutely, I think we have to remember too, a lot of users want to do a good job, and so we have to give them the resources, the knowledge and understanding, all of that, for them to be able to do their job. And it doesn't take that much. It's not, while there are lots of really awesome training platforms out there, if you can't afford it, there are free things. The government gives lots of free training, and making sure, I think, like some of those really high risk individuals in the organization are given that extra training is important.
culture is
yeah,
a big thing for us, and uh, part of that is developing culture from the top down, to where it's not rude to authenticate someone. It's not rude to make sure that things are legit. If you know if you build that culture from the top down, then you're really cutting off a lot of the potential for business email compromise or any of these types of fraud activities, where if you are the type of CEO or leader in your organization that people just have to follow blindly, and you're kind of a jerk when they question you, and if yeah, then I'm gonna want to build a pretext around that, and I know that your employees are going to be complicit and they're not going to ask questions, and you know yeah, and when you're authenticating people in person, it's just like it's not rude to say, "Hey, I don't see that you have a badge. Can we make sure that this is legit?" Or if someone gives you a phone call, "Hey, I'd love to help you, but I'm just gonna have to call you right back on the number that I have." And that shouldn't cause any friction with people who have good security awareness culture. And if it does, that's like an immediate red flag.
How many of us
It's
have
not
had?
unfriendly.
Yeah, I was just going to say, how many of us have had a client or something that said, "Well, the CEO doesn't want the phishing training to come to them, or they want to be excluded from MFA or whatever," and um, those those are the red flags that the culture and that there isn't buy-in from the top, which you absolutely have to have, especially if you're making such a huge change from the way things have been to the way things need to be.
Yeah, I think the culture is set from many areas, but it starts especially at the top. And um, the number of times I've seen people just do something because they were afraid of their leadership or their executives, and not jumping and snapping when the 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 request is made. Um, you know, it's protecting the company and the organization to ask those questions, to have a reasonable process um, to to authenticate somebody properly. Now in the era of deep fakes and the capabilities that the bad guys have at their fingertips now to impersonate somebody, that's even more important that you authenticate people in a way that you can control, not they control. So
Yeah, a big threat that's on the horizon that I've been talking about a lot is spear phishing at scale, which with LLMs now we could take a data set and we could train the LLM to take the data and to build pretexts that are highly specific to each individual user. And even if we don't have any like specific research or OSINT going into to enrich that attack, just like being able to extrapolate on the given information means that a threat actor who would normally take a lot of time and energy to do the OSINT and do the reconnaissance and build the spear phishing campaign for now that can be done at scale. And I don't think people realize how horrifying that's going to be. Uh, given that wonderful thought, let's pivot to any examples that anyone here can think of SMBs who are taking our advice. They're reaching out to companies like ours and doing the right things. Do we have any wins? Do we have any like stories of things going right?
yeah, I mean, I do. And unfortunately, it starts with the loss or the thing that happens to trigger the good behavior. But I've worked with small companies that had a total business email compromise, locked um, out of their Microsoft tenant in this case, um, and totally realized that we weren't aware of all of these things, and now we are, and we're going to make sure that this never happens again. And in a consistent and future proofed sort of way. Like I've seen this one company in particular that's just like a three-person company that paints things, but they really took it to heart, and they did some basic things like, let's separate our global admin account from our user accounts. Let's have more than one global admin. Let's control that in a way that's in a password vault. Now we're going to start using a password vault. We're going to put MFA on everything that's important. That means understanding what's important and where MFA needs to live versus it's maybe okay that it doesn't live in some places. So we're covering our bases. So again, that's back to your assets and your understanding what you've got again, and that's cloud stuff too, um, and getting some backups that we can actually recover from. should, something bad really happen and we might lose a bunch of data. Well, if you have an offline backup that you've consistently kept, and these folks did that, I this thing will never happen to them again in the same way. So, yeah, and it'll be less bad if anything does happen. So,
So I don't really have like I want I don't know what I'm trying to say. To build on what you were just talking about like MFAs and putting in controls. Um, I have a client right now who is super into security and they love like learning new things and coming back and even stuff like, hey, do we have? I just heard that we could block logins from outside the country unless we have an exception put in place. And, when we travel, then we open that exception. Yes, we do have that. And I think, recognizing your threat landscape and where the attackers could potentially get in is a really important thing for the small businesses, to be active in your security and not just I do what you tell me to, but actually thinking about what other areas might we be vulnerable to.
And
yeah,
it's just a handful of company or countries too that I was listening to a podcast recently, and they were more talking about the traffic generated by all the different AI LLMs that are out there scraping everything. But as far as like, phishing campaigns and contacts from threat actors, like just blocking from like like 5 or 6 countries cut their traffic by like 80% or something ridiculous. It's such a small thing too.
yeah. Well, and I hear people that say things like, well, that doesn't really do any good. Like the bad guys are still going to hit you. Like they can just use a VPN or come from, something else that they've hacked. And it's like, well, that may be true, but that is a whole other level of effort. And you're eliminating the easy reconnaissance from the playing field right off the bat by blocking those countries and those IP ranges that may be associated with them.
Because threat
It's a
actors
win.
they're going around jiggling the car doors to see if they're unlocked. Like I think people forget that. I think that like people forget that the most breached uh like access points are not are locked gates. It's things that get left open. And threat actor, we may go, oh well, that's so basic. Yeah, it is basic. And yet there are still people going around going, let's see if this basic vulnerability exists in your and they're scanning anyways. So they're finding out that stuff. So yeah, I think that's good
I'm
point.
big on, the minimalist approach to putting information out there for your company, and privacy and whatnot's important to me too. But the less you put out there, and that is from the technical things, from the systems to the people things and the human attack surface. The less you put out there, the less they have to work with to begin and launch an attack campaign against somebody. Um, it's the I get no information from jiggling the car door that doesn't jiggle. There's nothing, like, gives me no feedback, no idea what the deal is with it. Um, there's nothing to work with there unless you're going to, you know, force the issue and try and work harder at it. And these folks are like every other human being in that they're not going to work harder for something when there's no idea that there's going to be any payoff. Um, so like give them less information, not more. Give them no information, preferably.
Yeah, I mean, James mentioned Scattered Spider, and a lot of
Mhm.
people listening to this should be aware of that threat actor group. And there does seem to be this sentiment in cybersecurity that, oh, it's just social engineering. It's like that's not really hacking. Well, it's like, well, then why do like 90% of all breaches or whatever the current statistic is from all the meta studies that are done every year? Why is it a factor in like every breach? It's because threat actors are humans, like you said, and they are going to do the least amount of work. And it's the most efficient and the most direct way to breach a target. So why wouldn't they? Because it's not real hacking. Like, that's stupid,
Yep. What is real hacking then? I mean,
Right.
if all of these things, I mean, the vast majority of these things have a social engineering component, have a people component in it. I mean, even if you're talking about straight tech was built by people. So, there are inherently going to be vulnerabilities in anything built, and there are ways to use people to get at, you know, introducing those vulnerabilities, exploiting those vulnerabilities, even in even in systems straight up. So,
It's not hacking if it doesn't show up in the EDR. That's somebody right there is probably out there is probably thinking that like, oh, it didn't show up in the EDR, so it's not real hacking.
Hey,
yeah,
looking at job postings for tech positions at companies, you can start to, as somebody who's been doing this for a while, you can start to put together, what their infrastructure looks like. Go hang out on their website. What are they using on their website? Is it hosted? Are they running it internally? These kinds of things are it's low hanging fruit. Yeah.
easy OSINT, and you can, I people I feel like underestimate the value of OSINT, open source intelligence, and what you can actually put together based on that. That's your information out there, and it's you can put together a targeted attack plan fairly easily with just some basic OSINT against a potential target. So
And a lot
I'm
of
with
it
you
can be
there.
automated
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
because it is out there. It's on the internet. It can be scraped, and you put out your new email address on LinkedIn, and all of a sudden
Mm.
now you've just given one more opening for that to come in.
That's how I found out that a customer actually had a new hire because we started getting phishing alerts and I'm like, who is that person? And then talk to them and they're like, oh, they just got hired a couple days ago. Not really sure why they would be getting hit with that. And then I'm like, have you checked their LinkedIn? And it's like, yep, it's like, congrats on the job, but you did kind of just open up your business to a little more risk.
Look, if I can't get social media attention for the smallest things that I accomplish in life, then why am I even doing stuff?
Exactly.
I mean, I think every red teamer or pen tester should at least be given the LinkedIn like sales navigator subscription just so they can truly dig into LinkedIn and all the information because that's you know that that's almost as good as just it's like Facebook. You can just know everything.
Solid gold for, yeah.
And that's a cheap tool if you are, if you're a cyber criminal out there trying to, your job is to make as much money as you can, you know exploiting companies. That would be your tool of choice because there's so much information that you can get there.
Speaking of social media exposure and risk, a lot everyone here does public speaking and creates content, so we're at higher risk for deepfake attacks against our family. Uh, this is my mitigation. I don't know if it's going to be easy to see, but I set up an MFA token that I have in Authy that I share with my wife, and I feel like we're months away from having to authenticate each other because it will be trivial to take all the content and all the podcasts and YouTube videos that we've made, and the AI will be able to create something, and even just using ChatGPT's voice mode, it's indistinguishable
Yep.
from a human.
You've got my face, you've got my voice, you've got video. You can fake video of me at this point, and it'll be convincing. So, how do you authenticate people again? So we're full circle in that conversation, I guess.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
are plenty of companies developing AI to protect us from the AI, so I'm sure we'll be fine.
Yep. AI attacking AI that's defending against,
It's very
here we
cyberpunk.
are. It's, and
You know,
becoming more and more meta too, and it's abstracted away from humans.
Yeah.
Coming from a law enforcement background, you know, criminals are going to criminal, and they always are going to find, just like we have really smart people who are defending, there are some really smart people that are on the other side of the fence on that, and they're going to find ways. And I think honestly, I feel like we're going to figure it out. It's a new technology, and it's a new front that, we haven't been to before. We're going to figure out better locks for our doors, whether they are virtual or physical. And I think that at least that's how I keep myself from getting too overly anxious over the security things. But I really do believe that. I think we have really smart people on our side. They have really smart people on their side. It's always going to be that back and forth cops and robbers type of situation. We're just doing it on a different playing field.
Okay, so we just have a few minutes left, and Ushi, if you want that can be yours. But I want to ask each of you specifically if there is just one takeaway that you would want, the viewers or potential small and medium business owners that are tuning into this to get some actionable insight. What would that thing be?
So for me, I think just remembering access control. Remember that your business, your company, and the data that you have within it is sensitive. And think about your business as a house, and what parts of our house are secure, what parts of our house are not secure, and what parts of our house do we not know about. Because just like we were talking before about houses and fixing things, and as you start to fix your own house, you realize that there are places that are crumbling and broken, and bringing people in with fresh eyes is often really helpful. But just consider where you need to up your security.
Steve, what would be your takeaway?
I'm just gonna add on to what Ushi said because um, I work with computers for a reason. I cannot do home repair, and um, it makes much more sense for me to hire someone to come in and do the home repair, so that I know it can be done by somebody that knows what they're doing, um, and somebody that is going to understand all the little things that I don't have because I'm not experienced in that.
Glenn?
Um, Understanding what you've got, understanding what your business is. I mean, you inherently know that as a business leader. You know what's important, but you haven't maybe necessarily thought about it from a bad guy's perspective and what that can do for you. The other thing that I didn't really touch on that I want to bring up just quickly is, plan to have an incident. You are going to have incidents. It is you need to at least mentally have thought through what being on the bad side of a bad day looks like and what you can do about it. It is much easier to be present and be able to think through the implications of an incident if you've thought about it ahead of time than when you're in it right now and your lizard brain has taken over. You're not making good decisions if this is the first time you have thought about this thing while it's happening. So,
Yeah.
tabletop
James,
exercises. I'm a big tabletop exercise geek for that reason. So,
100%. James, final thoughts?
Yeah, my takeaway is more to those security professionals and security unprofessionals that are out there watching this is that there's 17 million small businesses in the United States that have 20 or less people, and almost guarantee that none of them are running anything close to a real security program. These are your kid's dentist. This is your favorite coffee shop. This is all of those things. So you may have a normal 9 to 5, but have a chat with a business owner or a decision maker at these companies in the areas that you live, work, and play, and just offer them some advice, because everything we've talked about today is all relatively cheap or no cost for people to do. Talk to them about like what I said about BEC scams. Hey, come up with a rule, and you maybe have just saved a company from future bankruptcy. So help those businesses out.
Okay, and just to close things out here, before I go into my little closing spiel, I just want to thank everyone, Ushi, Steve, Glenn, James, for being here and sharing your knowledge and experience with the audience today. Um, Let me transition over to my final scene here. And just to everyone watching, thanks again. This is the first of what will hopefully be many webinars and panels, and we want to create more content to give back to the community and to help out customers. I'm going to provide links in the notes or the comment section eventually after this gets done. If you tuned in partway into the conversation, yes, I forgot to hit go live. Thank you, James, for reminding me about that. But that's okay. The full video will be available on YouTube after this. So thank you all for tuning in and have a great week.